This is Polygon Issuance number 78 for the third day. We're going to review the third day of the NWA annual meeting. It's Jeff Wilcox here in the hotel room. It's late, by the way. I'm doing this after we've driven all over the place, gone to dinner late, then walked over to the memorial in downtown Oklahoma City, and we came back, and it's about 10 o'clock when I'm doing this. So this is going to be, I'm not going to zip through it because there's a lot that went on today. But the meeting started today with the keynote. This was from James Spann. Everybody knows who he is. And pretty much he went on about trying to communicate the science and compassion and stuff. And all that. And the only thing that I could say is it was very emotional, even for him, which he kind of holds it back, but I think he needs to not do that anymore. He's pretty much saying he's had it. He says we should quit talking and do something. And I'm thinking, hallelujah. It's about time, because they have to discuss, and then they have to have studies. It's like, well, can we just do something? So, and now I have to have a drink. So, that was pretty much like the whole morning, but it was only half an hour. There was stuff about defining weather-ready university, which was unfortunately after Spann talk. So this was about like how universities are being supported by weather people, like university meteorologists, of which Spann is one. He does a lot of stuff for the University of Alabama. And this made me think, well, there's issues where there's a lot of cases where stuff like this should have university mets and whatnot, or people that are keeping track of what's going on for school-related activities. So there was that. There was the Virtual Operations Support Team, or VOST, where Trevor Boucher, who's now at Austin, San Antonio, he's been at Nashville, he's been everywhere, talked about having a team, Supplemental Assistance Volunteer Initiative team, or as he called it, Savvy, but then if you add the S, it'd be SAVIT, which was kind of done during Tropical Storm Bill that occurred early in this year. But there were some people, this was during the question and answer session, which said this felt more like a Band-Aid to a problem. But nevertheless, it's something that should be done regardless of whether they're short-staffed or staffed at full capacity. And will we ever see the Weather Service at full capacity? That's about my thing. There was the thing about the Weather Channel doing how they create on-demand forecasts. I didn't do too many notes about that, but they do 160 some models for them. I wonder if any of them had the 999 degree blow about a couple days ago or a week ago. They didn't ask any questions about that. Then, of course, there was using Google Hangouts for weather education through the Weather Service. And they've been doing that for quite a while, both in English and in Spanish, because this was Jason Blaney from Weather Service El Paso did this talk. So I find that interesting, to say the least. So, well, we'll see. I think there could be some more. They've done it in several states, I heard. They're doing it in English and Spanish. So 4,000 students, some 30 or 90 or some schools or something like that. Find that's a good way to get involved without really leaving. So then we had some outdoor safety stuff, and we had the probabilities from the hazardous weather test bed, which I found to be somewhat interesting for the fact that I wrote like a bunch of it down. but if I go through it, I won't know what I wrote down, because somehow when I write notes, I then look them over later and then I don't understand what I wrote. But there were several things where they had different levels of automation and whether the forecaster did everything. Well, if the forecaster did everything, it'd be too much work. And if the forecaster just let it be automated, they were frustrated and they couldn't do anything. So there had to be a even keel of what could be done and what could be automated. So that's what that was about. So after a break, which was not the scheduled 30 minutes, I'll tell you that. That means it was shorter than that. They talked about, there was the concurrence, which there was the drought and fire one, which we did not go to, and then there was the satellite one, which we did go to. They talked about the Himawari 8, that's the Japanese Meteorological Agency satellite, that's similar to the GOES-R that's going up sometime in 2016, maybe. And it's expected to be, and I could go on because we talked about GOES-R for a long time, but they talked about what the Himawari has that the GOES-R doesn't have, and not much. And what Himawari 8 won't have that GOES-R will have, and that's not much either. So there was that. And they talked about using 1-minute satellite imagery. This is being done now with GOES 14, which is in storage, but it's centered as what you would consider to call GOES Central, where once in a while they'll bring it and do 1-minute images during a set time of the year and use it for use for a storm prediction center, like if they need to issue watches or outlooks and update stuff about what could happen if like storms are developing or cirrus and there's Q developing or whatever, which I find interesting because they can do during this 1-minute period. Of course, it's not quite 1 minute. So in a 30-minute period, you'd get about 26 images, which is better than waiting for one image every 30 minutes, where they talked about finding like the overshooting tops and all that stuff. And for next year, they're expected to do it again in February. And from mid-April to excuse me, it's late, I'm sorry. For most of February and mid-April to mid-May for next year. So be prepared for that as well. And then there was stuff about high temporal resolution satellites, pretty much continuing the fact of that. Whereas with satellites, and I was trying to think how they're going to do it with this, you can get an image. I think this is how it was, and if I got it wrong, I bear with me because half the time I write stuff down and then I don't remember why I wrote it down. Oh, excuse me. That it takes roughly about 12 minutes for something to take a picture, get spat through the system with the current GOES satellites, and with the GOES-R, it'll take 90 seconds. So there was talk about using satellite data for making warnings, which with GOES-R, you could be able to get these updates every 90 seconds. That's going to be, and there's not going to be that much latency, but the problem is, will you have enough data? Because the latency is going to be a problem. So that's something that could be used in the future. Then they talked about, excuse me, about using the joint polar satellite system. And I didn't do a whole lot about this, but there was a lot of talk with this about having a lot of partners with this, talking about river ice problems on rivers, especially during spring melt and whatnot. So there was a lot of talk about that, the River Ice Flood Initiative, the Fire and Smoke Initiative, and that's interesting, and we'll see what they do with that. So, and then in the afternoon, I gotta make sure I did this. In the afternoon, there was stuff about simulating MPEX mobile upside observations. And I'm yawning again. I'm sorry, because it's late. That's what happens when I'm late. It's late and whatnot. where they did this back in 2013, and there was some data that was good and some that was bad about this. So, because since they did it in 2013, you know what happened more, and El Reno and some other dates where they had some really good days and they had some really not as good days. And so it's pretty much more work will need to be done and whatnot with that moving forward. Excuse me. Then there was talk about this. This one, I thought when I wrote it down, I was writing this down and wondering, am I going to write notes for this? This was the impact of different microphysics and boundary layer parameterization on storm scale diagnostics. That's right. I was like, yeah, I have some idea what that means. And by the time this piece was over, I was more interested in it, but I still had no idea. But mainly for the fact that the people who were the one who was doing it was from Omaha. But it was interesting about the fact that they did cases with storms where the hail was over the size of golf balls or the wind was over 65 knots. What was interesting is that only hailstorms did not last as long, according to this, than hail and wind storms, which I found interesting. And they used, for example, Omaha, and had a storm moving to the east or whatever into Iowa, whereas a hailstorms would not last more than maybe 20 miles or so on average. I'm sorry, I'm yawning. Whereas a hail and windstorm went way downstream, at least 50, 60, 70, 80 plus. And it went longer as well. In fact, maybe hour, 2, 3, 4, whereas just a hailstorm maybe lasted an hour or less and whatnot. So I thought that was, I was very interested in it because it's something I can look at in the future and whatnot. Then there was some talk about doing some spatial verification methods on the ensemble forecast for low-level rotation supercells. I didn't take notes on this or the next one after that, mainly for the fact that they were interesting and they were too interesting, but I didn't want to take notes for fear I was going to miss something. But from what I remember, the spatial verification thing was talking about where they would see the rotation based on where it actually went. Some cases they did well on it, some cases they didn't. Then there was another one after that about an event where they used the WRF to evaluate the non-supercell tornado parameter for an event that occurred in northern Wisconsin around Green Bay back in August of 2013, where it was found that they could somewhat figure it out. And the tornadoes, it was in a squall line, of course, where you're not going to see the storms. You barely see them on radar. They did show the radar. And those are the type of systems that we see, that I see on radar in Iowa. So that's what I was interested about. The thing after that, which I did not stay for, but I thought it might have been interesting because I happened to peek back in right during the middle of it, was about utilization of hyperlocal weather prediction to increase grid resiliency and accelerate renewable integration in Vermont. The first thing you're thinking is, what? And I was like, yeah, what? So the other concurrent, because I was during a concurrent afternoon, was about lightning, which I should have gone to, but it's so hard to pick, like one is better than the other. You can't. I'm sorry. So there was a lot of talk about lightning and using lightning data during that session. And then there were several posters, which Unfortunately, I seemingly browsed through fairly quickly because unfortunately I was sidetracked, which seems to be always the case, and I'm always getting sidetracked about somewhere. And there was some other stuff which I won't go into because Henry did a lot of stuff today, talked with a lot of people and whatnot, and he's writing his thing for school and for our blog, which I'm hoping he'll put it on the blog after he does his thing for school. But that'll be on our website, iawx.net, probably by sometime early next week at the latest, depending on if he wants to revise it and whatnot. So look for that at that time. We are still now, depending on the fact that tomorrow night, which is Wednesday night, is a special session night, what I might do is I might get sneaky and get in trouble with Patrick Marsh, which and I could easily go and tape the whole thing, but I'm not going to do that. What I might do is it might be another case, it might be late again, where I actually post late, or I may end up doing the Wednesday show on Thursday night from Joplin. Thursday night was not a night I was scheduled to do a show since we were going to be in Joplin that night. So I may end up doing Wednesday's show on Thursday, and then we will still do the recap on Friday. So that's what we'll have to look forward to then. Speaking of that Wednesday, the keynote is Manson K. Brown, who is the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for the Environmental Observation and Prediction Deputy. I'll get it right. He's the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Environmental Observation and Prediction, and he's Deputy Administrator for NOAA. And there's some other stuff more on forecast projects, stuff about facets is going to be discussed, and then I got to move forward. The operations proving ground at the Weather Service, future plans at NSSL, future plans for the Storm Prediction Center, and then taking Weather Ready Nation to the next level. That's with Doug Hildebrand, which I saw who is coming, I might add. And then there's going to be some concurrent things in the morning. The awards luncheon is at midday, it's at noon on Wednesday. And then they have a coffee break after a luncheon, followed by another concurrent session regarding radar, and then they have to tell me radar or winter weather, and that's going to be a problem. We're going to have fun figuring out which one we want to go to. Oh boy, we're going to have fun with this. Oh, that's going to drive me nuts. And then the special session is going to have stuff about, it's going to have Greg Carbon's 2015 review. It's going to have tornadoes about severe weather during the Civil War, the Tri-State tornado from 1925, the 100 inches of snow in 18 hours in Italy, a live an anatomy of an historical event, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and then the flood, and then the South Carolina floods from just a few weeks ago. That's going to be for tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Anyway. That's all I have for tonight. I know it's only been about an 18 or 19-minute video, and I'm sorry these are short videos, but I didn't want these to be long duration, drag on long fests. And it's late and whatnot, so we'll say goodbye for now. We'll see what happens with tomorrow and whatnot, but anyway, so if anybody wants to get a hold of me like they can, Twitter at iowx, and my email is iowx@gmail.com. You can get a hold of me that way. And Henry's going to be live tweeting stuff when he can from the sessions that he or me are at, because we might not be at the same session depending on what's going on. So we'll see you when we see you for the next show. So thank you and have a nice night. Bye.